Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Obongjayar album, Paradise Now. Paradise Now is the second album from the Nigerian singer Obongjayar, who over the years has been building a pretty steady career, having done many different collaborations, including the likes of Danny Brown and Little Sims, and then releasing his debut album, Sometimes I Dream of Doors, in 2022, which I think was just a really solid kind of R&B, afrobeat, and funk album, which while that album wasn't absolutely fantastic, it definitely did showcase a lot of potential, and I think that a lot of that potential is now being showcased on Paradise Now. The initial run of tracks on this album is probably one of the weakest things about it, but it does get better as it goes. With the opening track, It's Time, just being a very typical Obongjayar track with the very high-pitched but still quite dreamy vocals. This, like many of the tracks on the opening run, is definitely much more R&B leaning, but still has that very subtle presence of the Afrobeat, which does become a lot stronger on the rest of the album. And despite this song teasing a little bit of that Afrobeat sound, the following track, Life Ahead, does kind of feel like it's going backwards more than anything, with leaning so much more into the R&B sound and even further distancing itself from being more Afrobeat leaning. Overall, though, it does still somewhat work as the second track, despite it being still so calm, but it is very lush, which is something I do love about it. You have that one very brief moment of the very raspy vocals, which I'm not entirely sure what this moment is doing because it does sound very out of place. And then the next track, Peace in Your Heart, I think is a very kind of plain and filler R&B song. And I think at this point in the first run of tracks, this song does just kind of feel like boring filler more than anything. The dreamy sound effects in the background are quite nice, but overall, I think it doesn't save this song. But luckily, the track Holy Mountain is where this album really does start to pick up, being so much more upbeat and finally then going back to the incredible Afrobeat sound that the first track teased so long ago at this point. Despite being so subtle, one of my favourite things about this track just has to be the absolutely fantastic guitar work, as well as the various tone changes that are placed really well and just keep the song so interesting and so dynamic. And then Jellyfish only further builds on that, being easily one of the most fun tracks on the whole album. The very Afro-inspired sound is, of course, just fantastic, and even blended with the R&B as well, just creates this really unique feel. And then Talk Olympics completes what is quite possibly the best three-album run here, just being one of the most playful songs, especially with how fun and fast the vocals are, as well as just having some of the best and funkiest beats on the album. And even Little Sims' very brief feature, as short as it is still such an incredible moment, with again her just contributing so much to the very fun and very playful feel of the whole song. Prayer then just starts to tone it down a little bit, and I think does a great job at just segueing the album into a much calmer run of tracks, which I think that other than the initial run of a few songs, I think this album does have an absolutely incredible balance of really fun and upbeat moments, but still having the odd run of tracks in there that's much softer. And I think that once again, this track has absolutely brilliant guitar work, and even the percussion, despite the track being so much calmer, is still incredibly punchy. Moon Eyes then only continues to wind down even more, but despite that, it still manages to be one of my favourite songs here, with there still being so much interesting stuff going on, from the beautiful and very smooth guitar to even the whistling in the background, which I think is a really, really nice touch. And I think at about this point in the album, around halfway through, it pretty much has shown off everything it has to offer, with much of the latter half of the album, I think, being much more focused on really just exploring a lot of the sounds that have already been showcased. It still does have a lot of really interesting stuff going on. Sweet Danger, while going back to the much more Afro-inspired sound, is still one of the much calmer tracks on the album, which does actually make it a really unique one. And just the very subtle use of these various African chants, I think, are used so well and just keep the song so interesting and really help the song feel so much more alive. The bass line on the opening few moments of Not in Surrender grabs you immediately, and I find the much more rock-like song structure of this track to be quite interesting, and definitely with it making it stand out quite a lot among all the other tracks. I think this is definitely one of the most consistent songs as well, and there's also just such an amazing and very diverse array of instruments on the showcase. And then Instant Animal leans even more into the album's rock side, with such an amazing and prominent guitar riff as well as the much more aggressive sounding vocals. The absolutely wild and chaotic drumming is also an absolutely incredible feature of this track. And then the outro is without a doubt one of the best moments on the whole album, with it just being so explosive and chaotic and really has an almost primal feel more than anything. Strong Bone, more than anything, is just a bridging track that mainly just kind of helps the album go into the final leg of tracks after such an insane ending to the previous song. The guitar work is pretty good, being quite unique compared to a lot of the other guitar moments on the album, and then it does have a really smooth transition into the next track, Born in This Body, which is just this really nice and very lush, heartfelt song with such amazing and soft instrumentation. I do love how much calmer this song is, with it just being placed so well, and does just help wind down after such an intense and dynamic album. Just My Luck is then probably the most pop-adjacent song, just having this really fun and relaxing vibe that still manages to be quite upbeat. The vocal harmonies on this track are absolutely fantastic, and even the very subtle use of slightly electronic instrumentation is a very small feature that I really like. And then Happy Head is just a very soft and very heartfelt outro to the whole album. And despite being such a subtle and calm track, it still somehow manages to find a way to also feel so grand and theatrical in some way as well, which overall does make it an absolutely brilliant track to close the album with. And so I absolutely love to see Obongjayar really expanding his sound and creating a much more fully actualized album. Not that there is much to complain about on his debut, but I just find that Paradise Now is so much stronger and more consistent and just has a much bigger selection of genres and influences that really keep it so interesting. Everything from the slightly more rock, R&B, pop-leaning moments, and of course the absolutely brilliant afrobeat features that really are what make this album what it is, being some of the most fun moments on the whole project. And so I'm going to give this album an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.